This is the valley where deities reside in the temples and bahals, in dance, rituals and narratives. The Kathmandu Valley is a space as if washed over by the mythical lord of the animals, Shiva. And the historical nuns and monks and many such beings of mythopoetic imaginations. The cities of the valley display the courtyards of the people and their ancient rulers, surrounded by protecting gods and goddesses. There are inscriptions, scrolls, pauvas and thankas to tell the story of the common people. The Sikhara and pagoda architectures, chaityas and stupas, dhunge dharas and pauvas reveal the sensibility of the community. We live as if in the midst of myth and art. We will take you to a journey in the valley to derive pleasure from its myths and arts, to generate aesthetic response by the surrounding creations. There are visible objects around us, colors, textures, lines, shapes, or the qualities of the objects one calls sensa, which stimulate our sense organs when we walk in the temples and lanes, rituals and performances. The cities of the valley are the mixture of complex objects, even incomprehensible at times. The vast valley space is like an abstract painting. The more abstract the visible, the more dependent we are in sensa. When modern life is spread around the intensity of myth and representation of art, we depend on sensa.
How many Buddhas can they destroy? When you cling to things you have, or crave a little you don't, and a voice whispers, let go, for everything is impermanent. It is the Buddha speaking. When your mind is a medley of wayward thoughts, and a voice whispers, get a grip on yourself, it is the Buddha speaking. When your vocal cords are taut and ready to hurl a volley of abuse, your fists are itching to fly, and a voice whispers, take it easy, it's the Buddha speaking. When your hand reaches under the table for a wad of banknotes, and you hear a cautionary voice, it is the Buddha speaking. When you are panting around the maze of the rat race, and you hear an amused voice tell you what a waste of energy it is the Buddha speaking.
What do you want, Ray? A holy spring, na bacha? Consecrate your shame to the holy vulva. Feel the power of Tantra, our Oriental Tantra, na? It's all holy and pristine, like the sky behind the smoke. I sob. I rub the sky off my face. Please let this pigeon my mother set flying many years ago fly in peace, in the silence, cascading down the Buddha's eyes in Swayambhu.
This is the story of 4 grey walls and 4 grey towers. The valley cities which are dear to me, as dear as what poet Abhi Subedi calls the vales of soul making. This is also a city of Kaiser Haq. This city, or Dhaka, or Paris, or Kolkata, he hears the Buddha voice whispering all around us. Like I walk with Professor Abhi Subedi, I will walk with Kaiser Haq to explore the rivers and banks, monuments and bazaars of sprawling Dhaka in the next episode of my documentary. In this journey, I will walk with Professor Abhi Subedi to discourse on art and politics, myth and memory, my propositions and his conceptualizations in the valley lanes and the temple estates. Sir, the aesthetics is also about the nostalgia. When we see a painting or visit a temple, in association with nostalgia, it is also about the anticipation, which is guided by how we recognize a temple or a painting and how we retrospect after our experience. So, visiting the courtyards, visiting the temples, visiting the spaces of art is also about history and memory, or memory itself as history.
I think it is broadly related to this concept of, as you say, harmony and aesthetics, because everything in a harmony, aesthetic, totality, the concept, everything moves towards the other for completion.
Yeah.
So what moves is very difficult to say. Memories move, the nostalgia, story, narratives move. Everything moves towards a certain harmony, towards a certain meeting point. So I think that is where we should look for the aesthetics, the harmony itself. And expectations and nostalgia, these are psychological subjects. That leads us towards a certain sense of perfection, meeting point of time and the present with the past. So this kind of movement is defined variously, either memory or nostalgia, this sense of perfection which is elusive.
And how do I then relate it with your play Aru Ka Phul Ka Sapna Haru, the dreams of the peach blossom?
Yes, I wrote that.
Yeah.
I wrote that.
And
play.
you wrote that in relation to the city, relation to the history and memory of the city.
That's a very important point you raised, because I set the play a few blocks beyond this place, the royal court.
Yes.
Old Bhaktapur Darbar itself. When I came there a number of times, certain sense of nostalgia, not claimed by people, but something that I felt, and then I realized after talking to the people there, I felt there was this sense of nostalgia, there was this sense of quest, search, and after coming for so many days, I decided to write a play based on that. And I moved inside the palace, and one day I met the guard, and he said that at night he sees so many functions, women dancing, getting married, and people crying and so on. And suddenly I realized, oh, this place is a combination, harmony of so many different elements.
And the guard himself is the sign of the nostalgia, because he narrates.
He's carrying a silent nostalgia. So many people's nostalgia was carrying and narrating. And I realized that there was a meeting ground of so many different elements there, memories, or there, history, there, architecture. And then I suddenly realized that that place itself was an aesthetic construct of memory, people, history. And what I wrote, listen to the sound of water in the dry lake. Listen to the rustle of leaves in the garden where there are no trees. says poet character in the play. So that means I'm trying to evoke all these elements of the past, the nostalgia.
And among these elements, how do you treat or how do you appropriate the supernaturals in history and memory?
I was not very strongly guided by the supernatural at that time. The whole thing, the power was evoked through the combination of the garden where there were no trees, lake where there was no water, and the memory of the god, and the architecture, the structure, the carvings, everything in totality brought out that energy. And I would not call that supernatural, but that energy.
My idea of the aesthetics, of anticipation and then recognition when you come to the place,
Yes, yes.
and then kind of retrospection when you move away from this place. All these aesthetics dimensions actually contributed in the making of your play,
Of course.
in
And
writing your
I
play.
came in anticipation of something that would, one way or the other, inspire me to go into the time element. That was my anticipation. And I involved myself into that through my imagination, by talking with the people. And after finishing the play, after writing the play, after showing it, which I showed in Nepal and Dhaka also, the play became everybody else's play. And I had the luxury of retreating in retrospection about what I did. But that was not under my control.
And that is what the entire narrative situation is.
Yes.
If I speak like an aesthetician to understand your experience, your play, this is the whole narrative situation you have created.
That's the whole.
And that is the aesthetics of the material,
Yes, that aesthetics evolved.
out of the material which you
Material.
interacted.
And also evolved through all the architectural elements, through the sound, and also through the language.
Through the language.
The lingo, the language element also was very important.
The aesthetic response from the visible is also evoked by this very image of goddess Taleju and its surrounding. The posture, the four heads of the goddess with 10 arms, is looped by two conflicting mythical creatures, the Garuda and its eternal enemies, the serpents. Then the garland of severe heads. The image is a harmony of circularity and half-circularity, a globular series of arrangements of parts pleasing our senses. The circularity is the mandala containing the energy of conflicting forces of the cosmos, both good and bad, the defeated and yet garlanded, both prey and predator, assembled as the crowning arc of the supreme goddess. The circularity of images collapses, the contradictions within one circularity. We see order, random or rigid, in the palace complex with travelers, stone images, reliefs, temples, the spanning courtyards. Within this order, the image of Taleju forms the balancing act as the gate marking inside and outside of various worlds we perceive.
every time I sing this, I feel inspired.
Sir, I'm always fascinated by Joseph Campbell's assumption in his contemplative work, The Inner Reaches and Outer Space. He writes, the imagery of a dream is metaphorical of the psychology of its dreamer,
Yes.
and that of mythology is metaphorical of the psychological posture of the people whom it pertains. Now, how is myth a city a myth? A city like Bhaktapur
Bhaktapur or even Kathmandu.
or even Kathmandu.
There is one story about, myth about the city of Kathmandu, how the city grew. There is one story, even today people celebrate that in the form of a ritual.
Yes.
In the beginning they took out the procession. And that procession is called Upaku. It is said there was no city. When they took this procession to this place, that area saw the first houses of the city. City grew out of that procession through the ritual. So there is a very inextricable, very close relationship between myth and city in this valley. And the same is the case with Bhaktapur. It also grew out of the myth. When we look at the structure of Bhaktapur and all the very detailed structure of the city, architectural structure, we can easily see how myth has gone into the making of the city. We can see that through in the rituals that people still take out every year at every season. So that is how we can see how myth has gone into the making of the city. There is one important discussion about the intangible cultural heritage of the cities of Kathmandu, especially Bhaktapur and Patan and other places. In that intangible heritage, people study, the UNESCO studies how this heritage has been very instrumental in shaping both the city as well as the life of the people, as well as the cultural pattern of the people. So, as you said, the dream element goes into that. The imagination dimension of the people, how they create the myth for themselves,
Yes.
for power,
Yes.
because Campbell always stressed on the power of the myth, and he associated myth with the journey.
This is how myth becomes metaphor.
That's how myth becomes metaphor, the journey. And so when people, the whole community takes out a journey, make a journey every time they take out the procession, they, in a sense, become the hero. To renew the energy, they travel every year. To renew the energy.
As I understand the psychological posture we express as Nepalese, I'm not convinced by the claim or by the declaration that Durga Puja festival, for instance, is a victory of good over evil. The good and the evil are not distinct in Hindu conception of myth as cognition.
That's a very important subject. I want to recall one story from the myth. When the soldiers of Rama finished making the bridge, Shweta-Bandha Rameswara,
Yes.
linking that to Lanka, they suddenly realized that they cannot use it without doing a puja.
Oh, yes.
For that, they needed a Brahman.
Yes.
There was no Brahman except Ravana.
Yes.
So they sent a request to Ravana. Oh Brahmana, you are the only Brahman, please come and solemnize the puja for us. We want to cross the bridge. Ravana, of course, came in the guise of a Brahman. Everybody knew that was Ravana. And he solemnized, he did the puja, that opened the bridge. The soldiers crossed and destroyed Sri Lanka and ultimately killed him.
Kathmandu Valley behaves with abundance of memory from myth and history. What is striking is the performance of memory with cognitive dimensions. When you witness the rejoicing women drinking ale from the pipe coming out of the mouth of Sweta Bhairava during Hathu Hayakigu ritual, you realize how such performances are the expressions of deeper passions to communicate mythic consciousness in the minds of urban locations. The urban valley thus is the child of myth. With such passions, Kathmandu constantly performs as crowd, as devotees, as mythopoetic beings, as theatre, as grotesque as beautiful. The second episode tries to capture such images of the valley to reveal its moments of performance. Artists and academics gathered our spirits together and went into river Bagmati to pay tribute to her. It was an inter-art performance which worked with words and images to communicate with the river. We have been inflicting her with cultural grotesque, and that evening we had nothing to offer but words and images, music and dance. We returned with somber moods in the cloudy evening of Buddha Purnima.
A mist amidst glaciers and cliffs, aura bent into imposing symmetrical progression. More eager than plant or beast, the word does not condense into its own emptiness, into a content twice in the history of words, or even once. One word simply following another. An orgy of texture, permeating all things. Wander-lusted wilderness, capable of vocalization only as the bewilderment. Go with the venture, one word right after another. I just dropped my pancake on the ground, it's all muddy. Did you hear about the dictionary? Turns out it's just a book of quotations.
Get lost! Get lost! Get lost! You miracle! Get lost! Get lost! Get lost!
No, I didn't. Many times I stumble over these words, but return to these lanes with more words. Alien but warm like the morning's avalanche of sun. Step gaily on we go hil par hilan to par to amanaram rovan ro all for Mary's wedding. Savala, Scotland, London, Kathmandu. The nose is pricked here with machine. Back to Kathmandu. Oh, village boy, there are many mirrors.
Foreign to landscape, blah horizontal, mindscape, pointless vertical, escape, inauthentic, but not to an elation produced by chant. Across a defamiliarized hill, neither nor, scamper the strangest natural forms. I would tell you what to look for, but mirrors are enemies of aura. You and I are both mirrors, and aura is everywhere, or so I reflect, uttering plaintive breakers, defamiliarized hill, strategic polytheism, etc. Walla Walla somewhere out there, whatever that means, while on the coast, I boast I'm at the edge of something's definition. If imagination has its limit, how know as much without having darted beyond it, eh, smart Alec? Mirrors are the enemy of all aura other than their own.
The sky spread its storm into the open palms of the gods in the city and descended upon it. I sat like the shattered sun in your dooryard, spreading my words, night time woven in them. That was yesterday. I came to the city, lost like a minuscule sky in the lanes, crept out of my own lanes of memories and broke into a dawn under the collapsing roofs of the houses of the gods.
The cultures in the valley have thousands of years of history, where mythical beings are as visibly present as the voices and images of the common people. We understand the dynamism of the valley when we understand its aesthetic dimension, the very materiality of the visible. The images of the human and non-human deities, the eyes of the Buddha, The artisans, the poets try to cut across the ugliness of the disturbing, degenerating modern everydayism. We try to feel beauty amidst the images of crushing emptiness, wrecked bodies, and disoriented minds. We try to feel beauty in the voices and images. Where there are images and voices, mind is amplitude of possibilities to create, not in the commandments of the gods, but in the very tenderness of mind and heart.